Morena koutou, good morning everyone. Welcome to this morning's Kaipara District Council briefing. It's lovely to be meeting in person. Please, elected members, please keep your masks over your faces when you're in the room here. Thank you. And all members of the public as well. These are our wonderful new rules that we have since the vaccine mandate changes have been introduced effective 2 days ago. So let's keep rolling with our extraordinary world we live in. But it's wonderful to be here today in person at the Magnifying domain with Kaipara District Council. I'm going to open this morning's briefing with a karakia. Kia hore te marano kia whakapapu pounamu te moana, hei ho rahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. For everyone's edification here, we'll just take a record of those who are present for the record. So we have, going around the table, we have Councillor David Wills, we have Councillor Peter Wethy, we have Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins, Councillor Deputy Mayor Anna Curnow, Councillor Jonathan Larson and Councillor Victoria Deliberations Woodcock. I believe we have Councillor Mark Vincent joining us.
He will join us via WebEx later on in the morning.
Later in the morning, so not in the first items, but later in the morning will be joining us, and I'm here as well. So I hope I'm here. So we're all here in person. Okay, thank you. Councillor Deliberations Woodcock.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to officially make a comment of my objection to the mask wearing as undemocratic, because I cannot see my colleagues' faces, I cannot hear their words, I cannot breathe properly, I cannot express my point of view clearly.
Sorry, Councillor Deliberations Woodcock.
Can I finish?
No, actually you can't, because...
Mr. Mayor, I am...
Sorry, Councillor Deliberations Woodcock, these regulations are nothing to do with us. If you would like to go outside, you can take your mask off and shout.
Let me finish. A councillor has informed me from the Waikato Regional Council there is no requirement for any of their councillors to wear a mask when they are at chambers and in debate and around the table. So this is an exceptional thing that this council and you as the leader are imposing upon us in an undemocratic way. And it's against health, because you are asking me on a very hot day to sit here and suffocate. Thank you for letting me finish.
Sorry, thank you. That's a remarkable position. Mr. Maris, please.
Through your worship, yes, we are applying the rules that are instigated by the New Zealand government under RED. Under RED, you must wear a face mask in indoor locations. You do not need to wear a face mask outdoors. I'm reading the website as we speak. We are just following the guidelines that the government have implemented, and our operational protocols are in line with that.
Thank you, Mr. Maris. Can you explain why Waikato Regional Council does not have to wear face masks?
I cannot.
So therefore, and you told me that it's the discretion of our council how they use the COVID response measures.
I just read.
It's what you told me many, many times.
Just read the rules out from the government website. Whatever the Waikato does is up to Waikato.
I beg your pardon?
I just read you the rules from the website, the COVID-19 website that the government have provided.
Yes.
I can't talk to Waikato. I do not know what they do, but we are always at KDC been in line with the government direction and strategy, and that's what we're doing here today.
So, Councillor Deliberations Woodcock, if you have a concern about being suffocated by your own mask, which is what you said, you're welcome to sit closer to how close or far you are from me right now. You're welcome to sit outside here where no mask is required.
That is not.
So you're very welcome to do that in order to participate in person. The other thing is this, as Councillor Vincent is joining the meeting later by WebEx, that prerogative also has been available to you, and you would have been able to do that as you have done so in the past. So we all know the rules for how we are supposed to engage in meeting in person. And I find it very odd that you would, having been working with those rules for a long time, then choose to come today and say that you refuse to work within the rules, because you're very welcome, like I say, to sit outside. You're very welcome to go to a cafe and join us by Zoom. As
We begin the meeting
doing
now.
once. No. So you need to keep your mask on as per the government regulations, Councillor Deliberations Meeting. It's very simple. And Mr. Maris has provided the advice here. So thank you. So you're welcome to sit outside and take your mask off, because it's very, very sad if you think that you're going to be being suffocated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that leave. I may use it, but I need my.
Thank you. Thank you. And you're, yes, and that's good luck to that. Keep it charged up. You may need to do that. All right. Thank you. Right. We'll proceed with the work of the day as per the agenda. And I'm going to invite for our Kaipara Libraries strategic plan item, Lisa Salter, please, to come forward, our Kaipara Libraries manager, and introduce Lou Sutherland and John Truesdale for this item. And just before we start, I'd just like to commend everyone on an extraordinary document here. This entire library's strategy document, I've never read anything like this about Kaipara District or Kaipara District Council that is so encouraging of a future, and I would just like to commend everyone for that. This is before we start this item. I think it's extraordinary work. Thank you. Lisa.
So, Chair, thank you. It is my absolute pleasure to be presenting our strategic review for the next 10 years of library services in the Kaipara District. And I welcome Sue Sutherland and John Truesdale to join us and speak about the review this morning. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and good morning, tēnā koutou katoa to you all. We're very pleased, John and I, to be able to finally present to you the strategy. It was August, I think, last year when we met with elected members at the start of the project, and over that time, a lot of work has gone on. Some of it was time bound by the COVID pressures, so it has stretched out longer than we had hoped, but it really is great to be with you this morning. We'd love to have been there in person, but we couldn't justify that really. And I know that these technologies you've all become familiar with over the last period. So I had a very short presentation, although I understand that you have already been sent that presentation. I'm just getting the presentation up. So it's very, very short, and we'll just, I'm sharing the screen for that. And I've had a practice with Gavin, so I'm hoping that this will work along appropriately. So can you see that on your screens?
Yep.
Yes.
Right. Good. Okay. Well, I really will cut straight to the chase about how we arrived at the sort of strategy, I suppose, for what was needed for the whole of the Kaipara District. And that was really to look at 3 potential scenarios for providing modern library services for the whole district. And the 3 scenarios were really included the new Magnifying Library, which is on your agenda and is being worked on as we speak. Each scenario included a mobile library, because what became apparent was that you're a very spread out district. You have lots of small settlements. but not everyone has reasonable access to library services. So they all included a mobile library. The bronze really was a scenario that obviously we didn't recommend. It really looked at the potential for Dargaville not to get extended, mainly through some of the issues around funding and so on. The silver scenario was one that we discussed at our meeting in August, which was 2 libraries, one at Dargaville, one at Mangawhai, and a mobile. And the strategy's been built on that. And then the gold scenario, which included a 3rd library in Mungatoroto, so the community library there, to be replaced, which would give you a good coverage of the district along with the mobile library. And we've recommended that that's considered after 5 years to see how the other measures have been enacted and what difference they have made. So that was where we got to. So then the strategy itself really considered, what is a modern library service? And the users that we were able to speak to, plus through the survey that we did in the end, because we couldn't do the face-to-face consultation, and the work we did with yourselves and other council staff, it was clear that the modern library is more than the supply of books and information, and that their lifelong learning role encompasses a range of digital and technical media and services. And that programming really is the way that these services get the best, users get the best out of these services that the library is providing. So the modern library service has become a place or a community space where people meet, they connect, they study and work and learn. So that was really the driving force behind how can we modernise the services and make them available to all of the district. You'll see that we ended up with 3 areas of focus, and what you will have had the strategy on a page, which I hope you have as a handy reference, because that really pulls together the kinds of initiatives, the goals and the actions that we think you should be focusing on for that period. And certainly the library, when I say we, I'm including Lisa in that, because she's been and Darlene have been key parts in helping shape this. This is not just our ideas, it's definitely come out of the work we've done with your teams. And it was important that we tied the strategy back to the council's visions for growing a better kaipara, nurturing our people in place by inspiring a vibrant, healthy and caring community. So I'm not going to go through all of those because you will have seen those yourself. But each goal then there are a number of actions that fall out of that. Obviously the strategy does require investment, but not everything, not every action in the strategy requires additional funding, but it won't be achieved without some investment over the next 10 years. Probably, and we have in the strategy put things that you should be doing now, things that will take a bit longer, and finally things that will require budgeting proposals out through the long-term plan. But these are the kinds of things that you would be looking to fund. And in discussions with Darlene and Lisa, they're clear that it's their accountability to bring any requirements forward that do need investment. One of the things we think, you always, in doing something like this strategy, you look for sort of quick wins and what can you achieve quickly, and probably one of the things that could be achieved reasonably quickly, and we think is a sort of a must do over the next 2 years, is to develop the mobile library service. So that's really all I'm going to say, because you will have questions, you'll have comments. I thank you Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to stop sharing that screen. I thank you for your kind words earlier, and I look forward to hearing the comments, questions, and anything that people want to ask about that might be, detail that I haven't covered here.
Thank you, Sue. So, elected members, are there questions of Sue for clarification? Councillor Curnow.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Sue. It's a great strategy. I just wanted to be absolutely clear. So, because I just got a bit confused in the document. At one stage it said do the mobile library now, and another stage it said do it later. You're recommending, as per the strategy on a page, that we do the mobile library as soon as possible, or now?
I think so. I don't know when I said not do it later.
It didn't sort of land at the end, but earlier in the document it was kind of.
Okay, right. No, I think
Page 22 of the strategy.
page 22. I did find one error actually. It was found by your planner. I can't say I found it. When I was talking about the size of the district, I had meters squared instead of kilometers squared. So that needs fixing. So page 22, yes. Revisit the model, plan and implement a mobile library service in year one, which is, do now. And then, I mean, these things, for instance, John's had quite a lot of experience in bringing on a mobile library when he was working with the Selwyn District Council. So, there's planning, but these things can happen quite quickly. And we're not talking about a large bus that needs a special license to drive it. We're talking more of a van or something like that. So, John, have you got any comments about that?
Just that there is obviously some time involved in planning, but because so many other libraries have done similar things, it could be truncated by using their experience. And yeah, we're thinking of something along the lines of I would say transit or Ford Transit or something of that size. No, certainly no bigger.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deliberations Woodcock. Question?
Yes, thank you, John and Sue. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
So my question is looking at the Dargaville population served of 11,500, and Kaikoura standing out for all the wrong reasons in terms of budget lines for library services. Do you think there's a danger of a mobile library serving to postpone a larger investment in the much needed library expansion on both sides of or across our district in terms of building and physical space?
In a way, that's a question that that the council's in a better position to answer. In discussion with Lisa, I understand there is some funding set aside for RFID in current plans, and it may make more sense to delay RFID until you get the new builds, because it can be put in at the same time. So there was, I know that they were considering maybe that funding could help to go towards implementing a new library. But I think it's clear that both your new builds are going to take some time. From my experience, they're 4 years away probably, and Dargaville may be longer depending on what you decide to do about the funding mechanisms, because I do have some concerns about the Dargaville funding mechanism, which I think we noted in our report. But you can't really delay implementing, your modern library services in a way, waiting for the buildings. Things need to happen sooner rather than later. And so I would hope that they're not seen as alternatives. I think they're seen as a way of implementing some of the initiatives that don't require funding, but that do require the ability to take services out to a community hall, or take books out to a community hall, or something like that, or to a marae, because people either can't get access, or the facilities really are pretty indagable. It's pretty difficult to run any kind of major program without a lot of effort. So yeah, that I would hope that wouldn't be the case. I think they're not they're not alternatives. It's not an alternative.
Thank you.
Are there further questions, elected members? Councillor Curnow.
I'm just wanting to clarify, it's interesting the statistics around running events in the libraries and how poorly we've been delivering on that. I'm just, perhaps a question maybe for Lisa is, can you let us know what some of the reasons are why we haven't got events in our library?
Thank you. Through the chair, the Dogwood Library is 66 square meters. The children's area where we generally run programs is very small. For health and safety reasons, we can't have more than 7 or 10 children at a program. And so it excludes more than we can ever, help.
So it's purely down to space.
Precisely, yes.
Right, okay, clear, thank you.
Councillor Wethy, question.
Thank you. Firstly of all, congratulations on this report. I think most of us have been involved with council for at least a couple of terms, have recognised that we've fallen well behind in terms of library services, and your report just confirms that and just shows you where we are, particularly with respect to our immediate neighbours. I don't think it's any great surprise when you look at our resources. The library over here, you can't swing a cat in, it's tiny. That is immediately a constraint. It's limited hours, and that, apart from Dargaville, is the same right across the district. You've made the comment about how quickly, made some comments about timeframes for getting a Magnifying Library built and up and running. I guess there's quite a lot of support around the elected member table for looking at the best location for a library and also the most cost-effective one. And we're waiting to see what options our property people come up with. But the council does have land that many of us believe has got metrics in terms of location, and also how the library is incorporated with council building assets. And I think this needs to all be taken. But to be fair, if we get at this table a paper that meets the approval and is given a go ahead, I'm sure that your 4-year time frame is quite extended by comparison to what we could get a modern, up-to-date library building operating here, because it's absolutely so overdue, it's not funny. And I think 4 years, in my opinion, would be way, way too long. We should be trying to get it done within the next 2 or 3 years if we can.
Well, yeah, and I'm pleased to hear that, Councillor, because I guess all I'm thinking of is that, once you get the land and that's settled on, there is quite a bit of work to do in terms of developing the brief. So what's going to be in this building and what size do we need and all of that. We recommended that the property people work with the library and the community development people, or certainly the library, to kind of get those parameters set right at the outset, because from my experience, if you don't set that right at the outset, you can find you've either built too small, or you've not built things in the right place, or you don't have so those things do need to be settled right at the outset. But if you can get it planned and go out to tender and all of those things and get it designed within a 3-year time frame, then that's great. That used to be the time frame. It's just that at the moment, with shortages and all of those kinds of things, I know buildings are taking longer. But this doesn't need to be a complex building. It needs to be something that's really great design, but it doesn't need to be a complex facility. So maybe 3 years is something you will achieve for Mangawhai, and I'd hope so. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question, and sorry. And so, just as the author of the report, on page 28, you've got, again, this is linked to Councillor Curno's question, and Lisa, this is about visits and programs, visits per capita, and the number of programs and numbers attending those programs. Now, we absolutely accept our kaipara situation that we have, and you're doing heroically, Lisa, with the framework that you've got, right? But the chart on page 28 that says there's been 10 events or programs and we've had 548 people attending in kaipara, whereas in central Otago, which has the same population as us, they've had 656 programs and 15,000 attendees for those programs. Now, yeah, it snows down there and maybe it's winter time and they all huddle together, I don't know. But look, I guess what I'm saying is how, if you like, how confident can we be in a culture in Kaipara district where people aren't even going to the library that they would do so? I mean, I'm really wanting this to be able to happen, but what is the rest of the framework in a communities that have never had libraries to encourage the kind of participation we see in the other districts that are here, beyond just building it, and it's really exciting and it's going to be great, because it will be, but kind of what other sorts of encouragements, Lisa, could you imagine to get people to come in the door when clearly there's a culture of not going to the library? Yeah.
Through the chair, there is already demand for programs in Kaipara that we just can't provide. Around at libraries around the country doing story times with little children and literacy with immigrants and numeracy, and you know, having the space for computers so we can help people learn how to use computers. There is already demand, and the people that are moving into the district from out of the district are really shocked because they expect these things from libraries. So I think the demand is there, and we are so ready to get started on programming and providing those things. And the mobile library service in particular, we could get off the ground really running with taking books out to schools, marae's, halls, having story times, loaning books. So we already have the foundations to get started. And how we're existing at the moment is providing things that are outside of the library. So summer reading program you do at home, a winter reading program you do at home, story walk that goes around the block. So that's how we're managing to keep the numbers up at the moment, but we're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, that's very clear. Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Weddy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, look, following on from your comments, I'd just like to pick up on one. We know we've got bad library assets. We've got a bigger library in Dargaville, it's better manned, but the rest of the community. Now, I'm just wondering whether, Sue, you might have some factual data, because at Wellsford, that's a rural community, like our rural communities, Mangaroto and Mangawhai. They didn't have a very good library, and they had a new library built a few years ago. Have you got any information to show what happened in terms of their library attendances before they put in the new library and after? What I'm looking for to see, is there any lift? So if we've got a community that hasn't got any real library asset, hasn't got a culture of going to the library, we suddenly put in a nice new modern library, all purposes. Is there something like Wellsford which we can look to say that's the sort of lift or whatever that we can expect for that amount of money that we invest?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. I don't have the data for Wellsford, but I could certainly ask my colleagues in Auckland City if they, could provide it. But I can assure you that whenever I was involved, and John and I were involved in the new builds or rebuilds or new builds or extended libraries in Christchurch in the 90s and 2000s, and inevitably there was about anywhere between 30 to 50% increase in use over the once the new building opened. And the other thing was that they well designed with the right facilities, they become a kind of a community hub or community centre, whatever you want to call it, where people can drop in. They can spend time there, either reading, browsing. If it has a cafe or a community kitchen, they can have a coffee or a tea or whatever. So I think the changing nature of the space attracts people who might not have thought to go. And but I can certainly get you data on that, the number of people that come by with a new facility.
I think that would be helpful for us because that is a community quite close to us.
Yeah.
And it's similar makeup, rather than looking at a city like Christchurch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's fair enough. But I will certainly follow up with them. I was just actually looking online this morning. They've opened a new library in Takanini in Auckland, which is in the poorer area in the south of Auckland, and the way they went about designing that building and involving people from the outset in helping to design and say what they wanted and so on, that's just absolutely taken off. So, but I'll certainly see what data I can get for you, and Lisa can present it to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Curnow.
Yeah, just a small sort of related question to Councillor Wethies. That I noticed that our library use in Mangawhai is quite low. And when you compare Dargarul and Mangawhai, similar size, is that to do with the size of the library, or is it to do with the fact, I think, when I had kids here and the Wellsford Library started, we started going down to Wellsford. So is that a factor, do you think, that people are just not going to Mangawhai because they can go once a week or once a fortnight down to Wellsford?
I don't know what people are doing in terms of that, but I think the issue you have with the community libraries is that they are volunteer run, and I'm not saying anything against the volunteers, but they're volunteer run. They provide book lending services really, and little else. And I think if you look at the data that's in the back of the report, it's clear that many of them are overstocked, and it's a mistaken belief by people who don't really understand libraries is that, the more books you've got, the more people will read. Well, actually, it's not the case. If they can't easily find what they want to read, or there's not enough new stock. So Mangawhai is doing the best, I think, of all of your community libraries, but they are voluntary run, and they're not unable to provide a full professional service. So that's to say nothing against the volunteers who are running them. They really can't be expected to. They're providing their service free of charge, and they're doing their best. So yeah, I think that's one of the issues, and space is an issue. I'm sure. I just can't remember the size of it compared to the others. I think it was bigger than some, but yeah. So
may I comment, please, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, certainly, John.
Several of the people I interviewed did specifically talk about why they didn't go to some of their local libraries, and Mangawhai was mentioned, and people talked about going to Wellsford, going to across to Whangarei, depending on where they were in the district, and quite a bit of that was about children's programming. They needed the library to be more than just have books, and Sue's already commented on how good the books are or aren't, and how much they change. So quite a bit of it was about getting more than just books.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sue and John and Lisa. Yeah, really enjoyed our readings report, and I'm very excited about it. I actually probably need Jason Maris for my question, who's actually stepped outside, because my question was more to do with what happens now, because this is a hi.
Kia ora.
So this is I have a process question, if you don't mind. So this is a briefing, and this information is really important and really exciting. And if we could all push the button, how great. But how do we do anything with this information now? We've set our LTP. I just need that explained to me as a person.
So I'll give it a good crack, and Darlene will jump in if she wants to. So obviously this one is to get your feedback on the strategy as well. What we do need to do is adjust it in some ways, like the do now is obviously not able to be done. So we just need to amend the wording slightly in that space. Then we'll bring it back for adoption. So we do need to get the council to adopt the strategy, say, hey, the strategy is looking good for us. What we'll then need to do is then start building it into the next annual plan, the next LTP, so that we have the budgetary impacts included in those documents, so then we can start enacting it. Your classic case would be around the mobile library, for example. There's no funding in any budgets for that at the moment, so we need to go through that process to incorporate it into the fund.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, no, that's good to know, because I'd like to push go right now, but I can't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Deliberations.
Yeah, so picking up from Councillor Wilson-Collins' question about process, a couple of years ago, council commissioned a feasibility study or a library purchase option for Dargaville Library, where we looked at Selwyn Park and various locations. And I'm wondering, Jason Maris, Mr. Maris, does that, do we have to spend more dollars, or does that document help to feed into the next long-term plan in our future planning?
So it all helps to feed into it. What I would say there, through your worship, is the very next item that we're talking about here in this agenda is the Better Off package, or No Worse Off package, however you want to call it. Funding provided by central government for the Free Waters. So council needs to go through that process about what you want to use that funding for. In the staff recommendations there, you'll see a list which includes the 2 libraries. So that's for the next item as a discussion point. That could be a way to do that. To answer your question more directly, all the reports that have been done previously absolutely come into consideration. I would say in the last LTP, we talked significant questions around the War Memorial Hall and the demolition and the ability to include a library in there and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of information that's been done previously to inform your decision.
Thank you. And another question. So this discussion, I believe, should be kept completely separate from any discussion about the use of so-called better off funds, which is the bribe from the government for taking our Three Waters assets off us. Now, we need a library. That's very clear from this strategy and this report that we have. But in terms of using our desperate need for libraries in Kaipara, in terms of politically acceding and consenting to a process that is unlawful and undemocratic, I think it's not helpful. Can you please not conflate these 2 political matters?
Councillor Deliberations, look, that's a very clear point you're making. Thank you for making that point so clearly. It relates to the next agenda item.
I am aware of that, Mr.
Right, so I'd say we'll cross that bridge when we come to it in the next agenda item. What we've heard from Mr. Maris here is that the Lisa and Sue and John, as our consultants here, are also seeking a bit of direction and any fine tuning from the elected members for the strategy that's here. So if we can just talk to this item and then we can conclude this item, then we'll cross the next bridges as we come to them, okay? So I'm just bringing everyone back to this piece of work. So the direction from me is that I'm happy to go with the silver or the gold options. I think the growth that is projected for Mangaturoto within the next decade would warrant a library consideration, except I would say it could actually be on a 10-year horizon, not a 5-year horizon, as indicated in this strategic document, considering how far behind the rest of the district already is. So the notion of 2 polar libraries, if you like, makes absolute sense out of this strategy for me. That silver level and going to the gold, I'd say, may need to be further away if we are also looking at a mobile service that's spreading across the district. Here is the situation as well. The opportunity, I think, with our communities regarding marae and schools and our brethren schools, which don't necessarily work in the same way as our other mainstream schools. They're a key part of who Kaikoura's communities are. So how to engage with those communities is really important. And also, but just in general, that notion of the mobile library service, I think would be better if it was slowed down to, I'd say, year 2, rather than doing it immediately. I think from the standing start that we have, I think that would be a challenge for us. But notwithstanding the great need and the opportunity here, because I would say that you still want your libraries to be a sense of bricks and mortar rather than just here's a caravan, you know, because as we all know how these things tend to work, is you go, oh yeah, that's the interim thing, and the interim thing ends up lasting 25 years, you know, and no one does anything else in the meantime. So that's some direction from me. Sorry, elected members, direction, please.
Mr. Mayor, could I just comment before you ask for the further direction? The do now year 1 is not, that's not about having your mobile up and running. All of these things take time to plan. And so if you wait till year 2 to plan, then you probably don't know what you need and how much it's going to cost in terms of setting a budget. So I think year 1 is very much about sort of planning, getting ready to you know, doing the work that's needed to understand how you're going to implement these actions. So just that's my only comment about why it's in year 1. It's really about the planning rather than the implementing.
Okay, thank you. So on page 22 of the document, it does say plan and implement.
Oh, okay.
So
well,
that may need to be changed to be
well,
year 1, plan it, year 2 to 5, implement it. That sort of approach may be better considered. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, I'll look at that.
Yeah, Sue, thank you. Elected members, further direction. Councillor Weddy, then Councillor Wilson-Collins, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, look, I'm supportive of the silver scenario. I think there is an urgent need to get into our budgeting and our planning the upgrade to Dargaville or a new library in Dargaville, and certainly one in Magnify, which for all the reasons we've already discussed is long overdue. I tend to agree with what the Mayor says that while the mobile library is certainly an asset that we would require and would benefit in the district, I think that we should put our priorities on getting the build of the actual 2 bricks and mortar libraries underway and not get too spread too thin. We are a council which is really stretched with our resourcing, and it's just, in my opinion, not viable to try and do everything on a broad front. We've got to very carefully choose our targets and put our efforts into that and get them signed off, completed, and into the community to be used as quickly as possible. And that's not going to suddenly have a broad front trying to move on a whole lot of options at the same time. So I'm very, very supportive of focusing on the Dargaville and Magnify library builds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My thoughts are with the silver scenario and moving forward to the gold scenario. Obviously, as elected members, we know too much about how quickly this can all be implemented. So whilst it all looks really, really awesome, there's going to be some challenges there to get it up and running. I'm just wondering, with the volunteer-run libraries, obviously not Magnify, we'll have two main libraries and our two main centres. But the other volunteer-run libraries, I'm just not entirely sure that they need to be disbanded entirely. Even if we have a mobile library, we have an extremely large district, and if we still had our volunteer-run libraries, if they are, if they're well run by the volunteers as best they can, the mobile library is almost a supplement to that, so that we can reach even further. That's just sort of where I was sitting. But how doable that all is, I'm not sure. But that would be my only extra feedback to what's already recommended.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Curnow.
Yeah, I also support the focus on the silver approach for now. But I really look forward to seeing a lot more of the detail and the planning and the resource sort of analysis, so that we are ready for the next LTP in terms of getting additional resource to make this happen. Yeah, I'm just sort of, if I can squeeze one quick question into my statement, it's just around the resourcing to do this planning work. Is that there, or is that sort of a tidal wave of work that you look at and go, I don't know how I'm going to do that? So where are you with that?
They're working with property and community. There may be some financial implications that need to come through the next annual plan. But we are set to go.
With the planning part of this?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Councillor Deliberations-Woodcock, you need to actually wear a proper mask.
I am wearing my mask.
No. You actually need
Mayor, can I
to be sitting there for the last 20 minutes, okay, with your mask down under your chin. Okay, and look, you need to be keeping the rest of us safe. That's your responsibility. That's part of each of us has that responsibility. So at the break, I'll be going and getting for you one of these masks, which is a proper mask that you'll be able to wear, which I will happily donate to you.
Okay.
Okay, so that you'll be able to be keeping us safe. So please proceed with your direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have seen other members of this room also dropping their masks below their chin. So please do not single me out because I'm feeling bullied by you.
Sorry, just follow the rules. Don't be in contempt of council.
But
Councillor Deliberations-Woodcock.
people also dropping their masks.
Councillor Deliberations-Woodcock, please just proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I decline to give direction because...
Okay, thank you.
No, excuse me. I decline to give a specific direction as to bronze, silver or gold, because I do not believe that briefings are the time for a direction to be set that is equivalent to a form of decision-making in a way. So I keep an open mind for the decisions, as is the democratic role of a councillor. However, I absolutely stress the importance of this council investing in public libraries across our district. And it's very clear from the report that we have been remiss compared to our peer councils in failing to supply a library service, which is so much part of our social well-being. And everybody knows I'm a frequent library user, so all hail to our Kaipara district libraries being significantly improved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to see this progress and detailed reporting going on, and I kind of concur with what has already been said around two main hubs. I think we can progress Magnify more quickly if use our own land, and I don't know where we ended up landing with the development contribution to try and fund libraries. Is there any survey?
Through the chair, development contributions to the Magnifying Libraries that we are collecting on behalf of that.
And
Up to $2.5 million in development contributions.
so we've already started to collect some funds there.
Yes, there will be.
Oh, yes.
It's in development number.
Yeah, so we don't actually have a figure on that at this stage, though. I think, yeah, that's good. I mean, I think we're tracking in the right direction with that. I mean, we're putting it all together, making it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No further direction from elected members? No further, David, councillor Wills?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Not to provide direction, but to my personal focus would be on the Magnifying Libraries. One of the concerns I've got with the library, because of the modern nature of it becoming a community centre as opposed to solely a collection of books, is the changing behaviour of people that are going to town. The retail stores are slowing down. People are not all going to work anymore. They're working from home. There's a whole lot of changes in people's behaviours. So we need to allocate the limited resources we've got. But I'd like us to bear in mind that they are more than just a collection of books. And the reason I'm getting to that point is that some of the more successful libraries that I've been in other areas have included the cafe or have included other aspects of community interaction, like Citizens Advice Bureau, or they've become more than just books. And that, in some ways, unfortunately, may slow down the process as we look to it, but it could become more of an encompassing environment than just books or a source for a mobile service. But in this consideration, I'm just hoping that we've taken enough account of how people are changing their daily lives. Like people are getting their pizzas delivered rather than picking them up. Sorry, councillor. But we're changing the way we behave in so many other different aspects of our lives. This is one of the few ways to get people to come back to the centre of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think this brings us to the end of this item. Darlene, are you satisfied? Yeah, with what you've heard here. Lisa, yes? Thank you. All right. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, John, again for your great work here with this Kaipara District Libraries strategy work. And we look forward to it coming through in due course to the full council for consideration in due course. Thank you very much. Go well, stay safe. Thank you. Right, we'll move on with our agenda for this morning to the use of better off package. Presentation here from Sue Davidson. The comments of Councillor Deliberations Woodcock are absolutely noted here because in a process here regarding the Three Waters program. So Councillor Deliberations Woodcock, I would urge you to in good faith, allow this briefing to proceed. But your comments are absolutely noted and they are important. But the thing is that we can't stop the policy that the government has and what they've put out here. And so this is part of the framework in which we are sitting right now. Sue Davidson, kia ora.
Kia ora, councillors. Yeah, as a responsible staff member and finance manager, I'm bringing to you the opportunity presented by government with the better off package. So if we go forward a couple of slides, please. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you about the package, the criteria and the projects. And you'll be able to edit them. Okay, so central government have advised the change and that it's going to be Three Waters is going to be mandatory. They've promised 16.1 million to KDC and there are conditions to that. The first portion they had advised would be available from the 1st of July and that one of the criteria was that we engage with Maori as to the use of the funding. So as luck would have it, we've waiting for quite a while because they've been promising they'd release the conditions and the application forms in February and then again in March. But on April the 4th, Nanania Mahuta made an announcement and released the conditions. And basically, it is similar to what I've got in this presentation. There are a couple of changes. So the full set of conditions have now been released. So if we go to the next one. Criteria for funding is to support local wellbeing outcomes. And so looking at low emissions economy, resilience to climate change, or delivery of infrastructure that enables housing development or supports local placemaking and improvements in community wellbeing. And for obvious reasons, a lot of the projects we've brought together, which have come from the community group, that they've actually been in consultation with the community in the past over, in my project list, comes from the supporting local placemaking and improvements in community wellbeing. And part of that's the reason that I'm suggesting to council that they concentrate on that is it can be seen and appreciated, and it's really appreciated by our communities. So I'll just read from you because government are seeing that the large projects are probably what they're suggesting. So from Nanania Mahuta in her press announcement, she has said, this better off funding can be used for those projects communities feel they need the most, be it local parks and gardens, swimming pools, libraries and community centres, or investment in public transport and infrastructure to protect against extreme weather events and sea level rises. So that's where she's saying that councils can focus on this. And obviously from a delivery manager, we want to make sure that if we are going to take up this funding, that we can actually deliver the projects too. So the lower number of projects is actually easier to manage than numerous projects. But so if we go to the next page, you'll see that this is the list of the projects that the community team devised, and it's on your computer. And the top two ones are, so what the government's proposing is that if we apply for the funding and we meet the conditions, which I'm sure we can do that in this reporting every 6 months, then we'll meet the criteria. These are what we're proposing. We don't have to provide for all the funds to be spent at once. And so what they're proposing is that they would give us the 4 million in the year starting 1st of July 2022. The balance of the 16 million not now be given to us till 2024. So the suggestions that I have put at the top, I said for the library and cultural centre for Dargaville, and actually the same thing for Magnifying, but we would have to buy the land because of, and those two quite easy. They've already been through consultation with the community. So they're in our LTP as well. So we could, it just means that the funding could change. It releases funds that we might have allocated to debt funding that now could be funded by central government. So, and you'll see there's a number of other big projects there as well. So, and what we don't have to provide is for it all at once, and it's 5 years after they allocate it that you can use it. So my suggestion would be to council that we look at a couple of projects, and as I say, I highlighted the Dargaville Library, the Magnify Library, which would include purchase of land at this stage because we don't know where it's going to be. And then we'll see how the funding goes because we haven't quantified that. That's just in the year numbers. Once we've quantified it, then we can see if there's money left over for other projects at a later date. Yeah, so that's basically, I suppose, my presentation to you. I have put in there, just as an aside, you'll see there's a note there talking about an office, because if we're going to build a library, it would seem relevant to put an office block on top of that, and that would be funded through the rent we currently pay to our current providers. We know that we're bursting at the seams in our current office. So but that doesn't come out of the better off funding money.
Thank you. Councillor De Kock.
Thank you, Sue. My question is, why has the amount penciled in for Mangawhai Library $2 million more than that penciled in for Dargaville Library, when Dargaville serves a much larger part of the district with all of the surrounding areas? And also, Mangawhai, we have just changed our reserves contribution policy to appoint 90% of the development contributions in a district. So Mangawhai is going to get a huge amount of development contributions money that can be used to purchase land for a library. So why is there being a market difference of Dargaville being treated differently to Mangawhai when we have actually greater needs for a larger, with 11,500 current population being served by Dargaville Library?
I think if you looked at the current population, you'd find the statistics have changed quite a bit. So
that was in the report.
yes, it's 2018, and look, Mangawhai has changed a lot. Whereas Dargaville hasn't. So what I'm saying is there is a wider community.
But also 45% of Mangawhai people are only in Mangawhai for their holiday period. So they also have the ability to borrow books from Auckland Council Library and other libraries where they have their main full-time home.
So what I said, why I put 2 million in this for the land, because I'm not sure, I'd have to look up to see whether we could actually put land that's actually using for a building. It's not really recreation as such like parks, that was my assumption.
But why can't we use the development contributions if 90% are going to Mangawhai of the district where they're generated?
No, that's financial contributions, and that is for parks and recreation, not libraries.
No, that's...
No, financial contributions are for recreation, not for...
But we've penciled it in the last policy. We're now charging $500 a year.
Contributions?
Yes?
Yeah, not financial contributions. So yes, there is some in the development contributions and we are collecting it. And yes, I have to look at the funding.
So we can...
So look, going through, I'll look at the funding. I want some input from you people on the projects themselves, and we'll sort out the funding later. So that's when we look at what's in the thing. And also we have better ideas of how much the costs are.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wills.
Thank you, Sir. Just going back one step, this is not directly to you, Sue. The group that we, as a council, that's been in opposition to the Three Waters process, it's been the other council's determination. Are they progressing with the allocation of the funds as if it's a done deal, or are they, like, it's what I'm asking the question, sorry, it's not a question. Are we, if we're accepting this process and it comes out that we've publicly identified these as the project we intend to progress, is that to a degree as a council acknowledging that we concede? I'm just trying to be pragmatic here, but it does actually go out to the public and say, Corporate Council, despite its opposition over here in public, has decided that they'll spend the money here.
That's a great question. You're looking at me, so I don't think the staff can answer this.
No, I didn't.
Okay, so...
Do you want me to go forward with this or stop? But I'm bringing it to you as a responsible staff.
Yeah. So,
we discussed that. I'm asking as a council, is this an acknowledgement that we are going ahead with this process?
All right, so thank you. So I think it's really interesting, and it's an excellent question. Whangarei District Council absolutely refuses to engage in absolutely anything to do with the Three Waters proposals at an elected member level.
Here.
And that's their approach to it, because they've got high court proceedings underway. So they're going in good faith. They can't be engaged because they can't be talking out of two sides of their mouth, if you like. So, and that's fair enough. The situation that we are in is that the government has said that it is doing this.
there's still, sorry, Mr. Mayor, but there's still,
And if you look to the briefing that we had just last week at Northland Forward Together, which is the most recent, regarding the direction of travel and the speed of the transition unit for the Three Waters reforms, there is no hint of them slowing down or particularly changing the course that they have already indicated as being the direction of travel for the Three Waters reforms regarding the transition from councils to the new water entities. So all of that process is rolling, okay, until such point as government says it's not, and it's up to government regarding all of that. So we, if you like, can very reluctantly be brought to the table and go, we don't like this, which is the position that Waikato Council has had, is one of asking many questions about the Three Waters reforms and what they mean for Kaipara District Council and for our communities, to which we still have not received the written answers. Kaipara District Council, unlike Whangarei or Far North District Council, has not opted out of the reforms, but they did, yeah? So there is no official statement from this council saying, we've opted out, we don't want to play. That has never happened for this council. We have, every decision that we've made has been one of engagement in good faith and continuing to stay the course with the program, as unpleasant as it may be, which government has proposed. So, so regarding the media and what the media would say, no, it's very, very simple. Kaipara District Council has never opted out of these reforms. So in that simple sense, we've always said that we are on this journey, that it's someone else's journey here. So I hope that answers your question.
it does and it doesn't, Mr. Mayor, because we actually opted to put money into the group of councils that was going in opposition to the Three Waters proposals. We actually agreed to put, I don't know, $5,000 in as our contribution. We joined that group.
Yes.
So that was a decision by the council to not necessarily comply with the government decision to progress. The reason I brought the media up, the reason I brought the media up is that this matter hasn't just gone away as a done and dusted. It's come back into the political environment nationally because more and more mayors have chosen, or councils have chosen, to become more public in their opposition. And so the only reason I didn't want to delay this process, but I just wanted to bring it to the table, because we've already had the first discussion about allocating the baubles, but we haven't, like, and I was one of the councillors at the very first way back when they told you take the money, and if you disagree, then you don't get the money. There's two options, and I voted in favour of taking the money, and I acknowledge that. But this is now the next step. There's 30 odd councils that are opposing the process nationally, I understand, 31, something like that. We haven't opposed, but we have joined the organisation that did oppose it. So before we decide to allocate the baubles or give the, indication of where we want that to go, should we have had that discussion with the council? So I end up fighting amongst ourselves. I don't want to make this about, it's like my great-great-great-grandfather being given 2 blankets and a couple of guns for a fair chunk in Auckland. It feels like we're playing the same game again.
Here.
Sorry. Slightly light-hearted. But it does feel like that. We've been paid off to say yes.
Sorry, so when this notion was announced by the Minister in July at the LGNZ conference down in Blenheim, that was exactly what everyone said. It's like, so councils are being bought off here to play nicely. and be distracted, if you like, because we're not allowed to put this money towards water-related projects. These are for other sorts of things in the community. So it's an interesting part of the political project that is the Three Waters reforms. And this notion of the better off package is, like I say, part of that whole framework that government's put together. I mean, from my lens, I think it's an extraordinary political project. It's completely odious because we're all being backed into a really challenging set of places here as councils. The question for us, because we can't resolve this, okay, because these are kind of big philosophical discussions, and this is not the agenda for those philosophical discussions that we absolutely need to have, but we don't kind of do snap debates, if you like, on these subjects. My purpose today as the chair is to get us back to the discussion here of the better off package, because these should we or shouldn't we discussions, I think they're perfectly interesting. There are another days for that, and let's have another conversation about that. Okay, the should we or shouldn't we, but it's a different conversation to the work that Sue has done here. Because I'll throw a curveball into this. The very first, in the PowerPoint presentation, the very first of the notions of what is being suggested by the Department of Internal Affairs, that what councils could do, okay, is work with communities regarding natural hazards and climate change. We could, as Kaipara District Council, there's hundreds of square kilometres of Kaipara District that's going to go under the sea. We could say $16.1 million all goes on to stop bank creation. We could say that here. And so why I say this is exactly regarding the work that Sue and her team have done. What Sue and the team have done is they've said, no, let's not do that, even though that's the first option that government has said you could use this money for. But instead, Sue and the team have said, no, let's bring it to community development and well-being in that sense of new infrastructure opportunities, rather than simple stop bank creation that would again protect thousands of people and so on and so on and so on. So this is the notion of what we're trying to get today, is direction from elected members about the use of the better off package, whether you like it or not. And that's what I'd like you to focus on, because I don't like it. You know, that's my personal philosophical view. I don't like it at all. However, it's here, it's on the table. How best should we be using that? And Sue, I'd like to applaud you for a wonderful paper that you've put together here that's very, very clear. So thank you for that. Councillor Deliberations Woodcock, you've been very patient over there. Sorry. Your question, please.
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, my question is, one of the things that you've taught me is that politics is an art, not a science. And I'm reading the room and seeing my colleagues here looking very disengaged and unhappy. And I have a question. How does this sit with my fellow elected members? So I preface my question with this piece of...
Sorry, which this?
I have done the calculations on 3,337 cubic metres of water that the Waikato Reservoir holds. And I've calculated that amount, that volumetric amount of water, by the current charges imposed at Watercare Auckland as of July 21. For 1 cubic metre of water, Watercare charges $1,706 including GST. That means that the amount of water in the Waikato Reservoir equates to 574 $1,922,000. So my suggestion and my question is, can we pick up Councillor Wills's question here of let us make a political decision to acknowledging the hard work that our officer has done, to let this item lie on the table until the political, until the process of the government's forcing of us to release our assets advances to the point, because as you know in politics, there is a lot of water to cross before they seize ownership of the Waikato Reservoir with $574 million worth of water in it. So can we just let this item sit and not pursue this divisive conversation about baubles? And that is exactly analogous to Councillor Wills's point of how our land was appropriated off Maori with blankets and muskets and baubles.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Sue Davidson, then we're going to hear from Mr Maris. Thank you.
I can see Councillor Mark has got his hand up, so.
Yes, I can see that too. Yes.
Just, so yes, you can lay it on the table, but the date is that the government has said that we have to apply for this money by the 30th of September. So yes, it can lie on the table for a while.
30th
September.
It takes it out of our hands after the 5th of July.
Well, that's a lovely cop-out position. Okay, thank you for that, Sue. Sorry, can we hear from Mr Maris here on the process?
Through your worship, thank you. And I was going to say exactly the same thing. As a matter of fact, I do need to point out, at the minimum, it would be good if we could get some sort of direction so we can plan at least. There is an administrative process that we have to flow through to apply for the funding, and it's all through portals and all sorts of stuff. It's very admin heavy, but it is something that we need to do. It can't just be 30 September, oh, yeah, we'll do this now. We actually need some time to make that happen. There are possible impacts as well, depending on what you want to decide on, not here today, obviously, but on the annual plan. Yep. Right, and that's decided at the 30th of June. So there are possible impacts on that as well. So my advice as the Acting Chief Executive when Louise is away right here, right now, is to at least have a discussion, allow us to do some planning. You're not making the decision here today. The decision will be brought in front of you later, but at least give us some direction so we can do some planning in this space. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wethy, then Councillor Curnow.
and Mark.
And Councillor
Vincent too, maybe?
Yes, and Councillor Vincent, yes, it's been acknowledged that your hand is up. Thank you, Councillor Wethy, then Councillor Curnow, then Councillor Vincent. Thank you.
Yes, look, I think that what Councillor Wills brought up is something that this group needs to have a bit more information on. I think that we can find out, and probably you're the person to do that, is to find out what is the general direction of the councils like ourselves who are part of the group opposing. What is their position generally? Because I think we need to know that. We don't want to go and suddenly break away if we find that, you know, there's 31 councils and we're the only one that's actually going down this track. I think that would send a very mixed message and the sort of the check in the armour that the government's looking for. So I think it would be helpful for us before we make any decision, like take Mr Maris's point, that this is something that will be part of the package of information that will get convicted. The other thing that I'm really quite curious about is that Sue's made it clear that the first tranche of funding was going to be made available on the 5th of July. And then you're talking about we're having to get all these projects in by the 30th of September. Well, I don't know about you, but I've always thought July comes before September. I'm just not sure. Are they going to give us money even before we put
no, that's if we've done the application now. If we do the application now, we have a discussions with Iwi And then we'll work with the relationship manager, get it in by the 1st of July. So I said they'll give us 10% of the money on receipt of our application, as long as it complies. And after that, the money will flow depending on we're doing the work.
So does that mean that we have to get our full and final set of projects in by the 1st of July?
No, they're only talking about the 4 million, so you've got to cover at least the 4 million. So,
Is that right?
yeah, which.
But that also, I think, again, it's a bit like signing a contract to get the 4 million, that automatically means that you're committed to the whole package. I don't think you can, as a council, go and make application to get the first 4 million grant and then say, we've got problems with the rest of the deal. I think this is the philosophical discussion that David was wanting, was to say, where do we stand on this whole thing? And all I'm saying is I think we really do need a bit of more information and clarity about what the other group of councils are doing. We shouldn't be the one that breaks ranks.
Thank you, Councillor Kerno, and then Councillor Vincent.
Yeah, reading the letter from the DIA that came through yesterday, it does say to access your council's share of the first 500 million of the package, your council will need to submit an online funding proposal by the 30th of September. So is that, you said that's only for part, we can do several proposals? I read that as it has to be one proposal for what we plan to do with all the money, is that right?
My understanding is that we can use the money up to 5 years after it's been allocated to us.
But we have to put all the projects that we want to use it for in that proposal that we get. I think that needs.
They just come out at the beginning of the week.
Yeah.
I've got to speak to a relationship manager.
Yeah, I think that needs.
I think we do need to clarify that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, but I think I read that there is one proposal.
Yeah, I read it as one proposal.
Yep.
And there's also a requirement that we discuss this at the very least with iwi and probably with our communities as well, if we're looking at building things like libraries. So, and we have the close down period starting in July, so we.
So can I just,
yeah,
with the community, so Sue mentioned that before as well. So if the project's already in our LTP, it then becomes a funding discussion rather than a consultation discussion?
So if it was the libraries, we've already talked about those, but if it was doing all the stock banks in the whole of Kaipara, it's not. So we'd need a deeper discussion. So my next sort of point is, I hear my sort of colleagues talking about their discomfort about council's position and what doing nothing while we wait for that information. That's a suggestion, but to me, I don't think we have that option. At least we need to be having the discussions with our iwi partners about, yeah, are you on board with this? Even if we decide to not do it, we've got until July to do those discussions and also have the conversations about whether we should opt out or not. But if we wait till we decide on opting out or not, we're going to miss the boat. And then the presentation that we had before about the libraries, assuming those were the projects that happened, becomes redundant because we still can't afford to do it. So it'll be another 10 years. So my statement, which I've slipped into here, is that I don't think we can wait for the discussion about whether we're in or out. We can have that, but we need to be progressing this anyway, because otherwise we're going to miss the boat. And this letter is quite clear. We will miss the boat. It won't happen. We will, and then we have to answer to our community about why we turned down 16 million, because Three Waters is likely, as Sue has pointed out, going to happen anyway.
Sorry, I can disagree with the last thing. It's still, if I thought it was going to happen, I wouldn't have raised this at the table now. I would have just accepted it.
But I mean, the advice we're getting from officers is that the message coming from central government is that it's going to happen. So we can say that we hope it doesn't, and we could even jump on board, which we have with this other organisation, say we don't like it. But the message we're getting is that it's going to happen. And so therefore our decision, when it comes to making a decision, is are we going to turn away the 16 million, even though this Three Waters thing is going to happen anyway? And I don't think that would be fair on our communities to do that.
So that's a clear statement and direction. So it's very, very challenging for all of us here. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and fellow councillors. It's good to ECU. Yeah, I think that the question raised by Councillor Wills is the most important one that needs to be addressed before making a commitment to the other thing. And I could perhaps just briefly rephrase what Councillor Curnow has said. To me, it's a choice between do we, and I guess what it comes down to is what is the legacy? My question would be, what is the legacy this council is going to leave the district? Because in foreseeing with the changes that are going, I foresee the demise of the Kaipara District Council. So what's going to be left? Will our legacy be that we nobly cut off our noses to spite our faces, or we, in a more pragmatic approach, we actually held our noses because of the smell and proceeded to do what was in the best long-term interests of our communities with what will be remain. So I guess that's what I could call that a rhetorical question, but that's where it sits for me at present. In terms of think about the longer term thing. If it meant that that we were able to block the reforms because we had something better in mind by refusing this money, well, that would be an interesting question, but I don't see it that's how it's going to play out. Thank you.
Thank you, that's clear. So I'm wanting to bring this item back around, okay, and into focus regarding the Better Off package. There's a clear request, Councillor Wills, from you here that, and Councillor Withy's reiterated that, regarding seeking knowledge about what the rest of the framework is doing, all the communities for local democracy. How are those councils behaving in light of this? So I can go away and find out about that. So I would suggest that what we do is, rather than trying to or attempting to provide the direction today that Sue is seeking with this paper, that if you like, that what we do is we have this lie on the table. It's a very live matter. We still do have some time, but not a lot. And I would say, Mr. Maris, that to bring it back to the, where are we now, April, the May briefing, then we can get to this philosophical point, okay? And we can also have other catch-ups regarding this philosophical point so that people have comfort or not about whether we proceed or not. Not about what the projects may be or not, which is, if you like, where Sue and the team is at, is they're saying, assuming you're in which projects, but the council, what I'm hearing from the council is there's actually a question earlier than that, which is, are we even in? Yeah? And so we need to gather to resolve that point, okay, but also, which is not for the officers and the staff of the council, that's elected members only. But then the question is that the paper does need to come back, that if we are in, then clearly we can't do the stop bank, $16 million on stop banks, but we could do these sorts of projects that are here in this list, that have been in the LTP and been consulted upon with the time frames that we have. Is everyone comfortable with that approach? Councillor Withy.
I think that sums it up pretty well, Mr. Mayor. I think we need that extra information, but I think I also applaud Sue for putting this together, this paper, because, you know, this is the first time we've seen it, and now we have an opportunity waiting for this extra information to let these projects and things to take hold in our minds and get a better perspective of where we could spend this money. And I also take on board, and this is again, as the Mayor just mentioned about spending the money, the $16.1 million, and I don't know where the hell they get the 0.1 from, but why they don't round things up, but down. On dock banks, that I think your decision to concentrate on projects rather than climate change effects or mitigating those is the right one. I see the government's attempt through the minister's words to local councils for this, call it what you like, money that they're giving us to go into climate change mitigation is really saying it's all too hard for central government. Let's get the local government to do it for us. Yeah, put your money into this. And I just find that quite obnoxious, quite frankly. I think they're not taking this, and there's been a lot of comment in the last few days about the central government's approach on climate change and how we're not making grade. So this is just another example of that. So I think I applaud what you've done in terms of putting the initial paper together for us to consider in the wellbeing project. And I think once we get this other information and we can put it all together, we'll be in a much better position in perhaps beginning of next month. And we'll still meet the timeframes that are required to get something together within a month.
Councillor Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the time you've let us have this discussion. Sue, sorry, because we could end up actually having a de facto discussion about this paper while we're not having a discussion about it. So, but I'm just asking from a pragmatic process how we can keep this, get this done and discussed relatively quickly. So you've got our next meeting, our next briefing, and they tend to go the other way around, but how will we, I'm just asking, please, without holding the meeting up, how we can get this done, because I do accept what Councillor Vincent said about holding our nose rather than fighting our nose. And I do appreciate the paper being brought to us, and there's been no one argue about the paper allocation or the thinking behind it. But we can't give an indication of that without having had the other discussion, otherwise we defeat the purpose of the other discussion about what we're going to do as a council or where we believe our philosophy is in this matter. So I'm just asking Mr. Maris how we can get those into our next two meetings so that there's some solid progress and it's done and dusted and we can move on, please.
Through your worship, so what we can do, the philosophical discussion that you need to have can be done whenever you want. It can be done in the council briefing as well. We can dedicate more time to the next council briefing for that. And we can put this paper back on the briefing as well to enable that conversation. I think you've given yourself some time to contemplate two things. A, your stance on where you want to be as a council. And individually, you need to come to the conclusions first. And then B, if you could do some thinking around the projects that are on that list as well, or other thinking also. The one thing I would say about coming back at the next briefing is if we do need to consult with the community, we run out of time pretty quickly. So I suppose the other projects that you might think out that might be so valuable for the community, we would have to do a really quick community consultation process, and that would put the organisation under pressure.
Can it not be run over the top of the, or at the end of the externally funded meeting that we all are members of? Yeah, that's a couple of weeks away, isn't it, from my agenda? I don't want to slow the process down. I just want to get some, direction from us as a group. And I've done a lot of talking. I mean, for example, Councillor Larson hasn't spoken to this or for or against. I'm just asking.
2 weeks away, another 2 weeks away. That should be fine for you.
So I'd say, Mr. Maris, we're hearing direction here from the officers, not expecting a calendar date decision right now as to which meeting that will be at. But the important thing, as I'd say, is another discussion, a non-decision-making discussion on the subject.
Including the contribution of the information from that community, the group that we're part of, the feedback.
Yes. Yeah. But a non-decision-making discussion in this space at some point within the next few weeks, and then still heading towards a decision ultimately that can help to inform, hopefully, the annual plan.
So through you, Worship, thank you, Councillor Wills. So what we'll do is we'll put this item on the next briefing. Okay, and then if there's a decision need to be made subsequent to that, the decision will be made. Prior to that, I'll work with the mayor and we'll find some time to enable the council to have that high-level discussion, I suppose.
Thank you. Just because I understand the concern to make sure that we actually have something in place if we choose to go down this path. Well, thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Look, so thank you, Sue. Thank you very much for your very good work in this space, and we'll be seeing you again on this, but it's really solid so far. Thank you, everyone. So at this point, we'll adjourn for our morning tea break. We'll resume at 11:15, please. And John Burt is here for our next item regarding the procurement policy review. Thank you, 11:15. Kia ora.
Thank you for your support.
No, but you've obviously a little bit quick.
Yeah.
Ashley's resigned. Ashley Bluetooth's resigned. Yeah. He's stepping down in July. What do you mean, why? He would have been under so much pressure.
Like nothing, but I mean like nothing.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, no.
Like, so often people in those positions resign from.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, enough of he's had enough. I've had enough and I have, you know, a pinky fingernail worth of his sort of.
I know, I agree, hey. No, it doesn't say why.
I should move around.
We're going to take a little bit of a break. Fair enough.
Somewhere. Yes, actually, I'm going to 2 days ago. Nice to see you. Thanks, darling.
Are you here? Right, we're making a start in a moment. Thank you, Councillor Deliberations Woodcock. Here's a gift to thee from me. This is a $7 KN95 protective mask, just like this. Beautiful grey, will match your blouse.
Thank you, but no thank you.
You won't be suffocated if you wear this.
Yeah, thank you, but no thank you.
Oh, well, I don't offer you anything. Because we don't want you being suffocated and we don't want to be seeing unsafe practices with the cloth mask you're wearing. Thank you. Thank you. John Bird.
Thank you, Your Worship. Obviously, all councillors have had the presentation on the proposed procurement policy and the review that we're currently underway. So in short, the current document that we use was adopted quite some time ago in 2014. And the organisation was in a different stage at that time. Was developed by some consultants, Morris and Maori. It served us quite well, but it's time for it to be refreshed. And with Shereen and myself looking around at what other councils do, it's quite clear that the usual practice today is to have a separate briefing policy, and for a lot of the process matters to be incorporated in a manual which sits outside that. And so that's the approach that Whangarei districts have taken. And their policy and manual is based on some templates used by around 8 other councils around the country. So we're proposing that we do the same. So we've essentially this template, Whangarei right now makes some minor changes to it, and now seeking feedback from the elected members. One of the key changes that we have in this manual, from the manual to what we have now, is that we're incorporating a separate health and safety management of contractors. So that allows us, one of the frustrations that officers have at the moment to do with procurement is around assessing the risk involved in engaging certain contractors and assessing their ability to meet health and safety requirements. So by having this as a separate process, the policy itself doesn't get bogged down on those details. Happy to take any questions and also feedback from the elected members.
Thank you, John. Councillor Curnow.
Yes, thanks, John. I do agree with the approach of setting out the strategy policy and the actual manual. But I do have just a couple of questions in this, if that's okay. under compliance, the second paragraph said, from time to time, exceptional situation, may need to fall outside the rules. And when that happens, the suggestion is it comes to the chief executive. Is there any time when it would come to council?
Generally, the urgent situations are around civil defence emergencies. And so they really need to act on quickly.
Yeah.
So I think not. The policy considers that only the exceptional circumstances in an emergency that you use those emergency procurement rules. So.
Okay. And then, yeah, so I'm just wondering whether there should be any reference just to sort of pitch when that would happen. So that's just a little bit of feedback. And then exclusions to the policy. Yeah, I'm just wondering, so when it says projects when council is engaged with other bodies, councils or consortiums, and there's something in the policy a bit later about external funders or the next piece that, so I'm just wondering, should the policy be more specific about when other policies might overtake ours or when ours is dominant? So the relationship between those policies, because it's just a little bit, for me, it feels a little bit loose, that it sort of depends, or maybe that's appropriate. I don't know.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to sound too tied down with that. I guess the many of those agreements with other organisations would come to council anyway,
right,
for an MOU or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And certainly if they trigger any of the delegations levels, they'll have to come to council. So
yeah. So, just again, maybe that needs to be just stated that there are exceptions.
We could add subject to appropriate delegations or something like that.
Yeah, that might give me some more comfort. And then just the next section on alignment, you refer to the Kaipara District Council sustainability strategy. I had a look in our policy register, but I couldn't find a sustainability strategy, but maybe it sits outside our policy register. So I'm just wondering, do we have one?
I know I ran this past Katie, so she hadn't given me any feedback. So
okay,
we may not have a strategy. I know we've got a. I mean, for me, I'm not.
Well, double check that there are a couple of things in that policy that still reflect WDC, so it could be a hangover from that.
Yeah.
But
I'm just wondering, because if we're going to say it, then we should have one.
Yeah, absolutely.
We shouldn't say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think.
We certainly don't have a policy, that's for sure, or a strategy. Or a strategy-like document we probably have. I know that's what's considered.
Just need to,
Sustainability several times. So.
Yeah, probably just need to make sure that the wording is completely aligned there. And then in 8.7, which is on page 121, the sustainability section, is economically sustainable also something that should be in that list? Because it is environmental sustainability, but maybe it should be called environmental sustainability. Because I sort of flicked through the list and went, I'm not sure about economic sustainability. It's not there.
Well, I guess that any sustainability work, you have to consider the economics because you can go to the nth degree, but the cost may outweigh the benefits. I think it has to be an element of economics and your approach to sustainability. So I would suggest leaving it in there.
Oh, I don't think it is in there. That's the only thing.
Oh, well, no, it's just in below the list. It mentions these considerations typically divided thus environment, economic, and social.
Okay.
So
should it be in the list?
So would you have a definition, a simple definition of sustainability that we would be applying here? such as sustainability is the ability to keep doing something in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So it's not my area of expertise. I have need to
So
engage with Katie on more succinct definition of sustainability.
Yeah, I just, maybe that, it just needs a little bit tightening up to make sure that economic is not excluded. Because when you look at the list, economic sustainability looks like it's not part of our sustainability, which it would be. And then going on to 8.8, under our, in the current procurement policy, we have a target percentage for local supply, don't we?
In the strategy that we council's offered, not in the current procurement manual, there's no.
Okay, but in the strategy there is. Should that reflect through into this?
Well, we reference the strategy in this document, so
Okay.
Normally you wouldn't restate something.
Okay, that's cool. And that's all I had.
thank you.
Actually, no, sorry. Section 10, governance and sign off. Reading through that section, I just got a little confused about whether we're talking project governance or elected member type governance. Because it sort of, at one stage, it talks about the governance responsibility and later on it talks about project governance.
Well, it's referencing delegations. So depending on the level of the project and expenditure, where the governance sits would be different. So if it was under 500,000, for example, chief executive.
Okay, so by governance you mean not this governance?
It may do if the delegations require it. So again, the policy always refers back to the delegation. So anything that requires council's approval, when we talk about governance, it's separate talk about council.
Okay, so I see that when providing approval to award a contract or not, the person with the governance responsibility. Okay, so that means whether it's us or.
True, we could just simply call it decision making.
Yeah.
Just to clarify that.
Okay. Cool, that's good. Thank you. Good. Thanks very much, John.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Deliberations Woodcock.
Yeah, so I just pick up here in the manual on 3.3 council's broader objectives. There is a mention of Kaipara-based vendors will be the preferred supplier when there are two equal tenderers or suppliers contending for a supply.
So this is in the existing manual.
Yes.
Yeah.
So am I to understand this policy supports, or obviously is the policy, but the manual is retained?
We will retain the manual, but it will be separate. It won't be a combined document like we've got now, and it will be refreshed to reflect the current practices.
Okay, so my question is, what can council do differently to get more local Taipara suppliers?
Well, I think the new policy is obviously encouraging that through the current procurement strategy. We're required by the government to broad outcomes in our procurement, and those those mandated from local government as well as central government. So I think there's already quite a broad thrust in that area of encouraging the broad outcomes in local procurement and all that sort of things. I think it's safe.
So that's great, and I can see that the government has those, dark aims and objectives, and as do our policies and our strategies and our manual, all point to the same objective. But in reality, my time on council, I have seen duopolies and monopolies, and I don't see the environment that is encouraging local suppliers to actually invest or to come forward. And actually in a last decision meeting, we had a closed tender approach for a maintenance and operation contract that was awarded, and I'm trying to understand how is it that we have these lofty, but the reality is in local government, it seems that the same firms, which are not New Zealand firms, are delivering all our services, roading, free waters, and even parks and reserves. Can you please talk to that?
You're right, there are some very large organisations that are in the space, but often in our contracts, we do include requirements for local.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, you know, it may not be that they think the whole cherry, but they certainly get a bite of the cherry through that approach. And I know also the waters and a lot of the smaller projects for renewals and so forth, they have set up a local panel of suppliers, which is at least one of the organisations based in but at least Auckland as well. So I think there is some good work being done in that area. But with the very large contracts that council put up, it makes it very hard for small organisations on their own to win and bid and win those, because they don't have the track record, they don't have the systems in place, but they can participate in it through mandated local input that you might include in those contracts.
So one of the very good examples, Councillor Deliberations Woodcock, you may recall, is the PGF roading funding, 30% of which was required under our contract to be directed to local roading companies.
That's a one-off.
Sorry. No, but it is a perfect example of how our procurement strategy and documents, okay, are all in alignment, which is what we're talking to today, to that work which has been done, which has now enabled and encouraged Kaipara located and Kaipara owned businesses, specifically, and we've all had this through our wonderful reports about the PGF funding, specifically Hugh Bands and Kevin Reid Contracting have expanded their businesses significantly based on the fact that our council's procurement approach, okay, has been to expand local businesses. The great challenge, as John Burt has just said, is that you can't go to a local plumbing shop and say, please run the $40 million Magnifying wastewater system, because that's not their gig. They can't do that. It would be wonderful if they could, but little Kaipara communities of only 25,000 people, we don't have all of those opportunities. So with all our businesses that are here, the important thing is this procurement approach that we have is already working absolutely right across Kaipara District with all of this infrastructure work. So it is a solid approach that we have here. You've received reports on that in the past. People can, go back and look again at our wonderful businesses. I was due to be at a breakfast meeting tomorrow morning with the team from Hugh Bands in Paparoa, okay, and they've been working the Page Green system across the PTF roads, yeah, and meeting with them because they wanted to celebrate with the mayor what they have been doing, okay, and to be getting the feedback that they know that we've been talking about at our council table level about how well those local contract businesses have actually been delivering out of that $8 million PGF grant for the roads. And so these things are absolutely working. I'm happy to share more of that with you offline if you would like, but it's certainly working. John, and the procurement strategy aligns with everything I'm talking to here and that we see evidenced in our community. So we're seeking further feedback and direction for John here.
Yes. So would you agree, John, you talked about a cherry and locals getting a little bite, if we talk about a pie and there like being 12 portions in a pie, I'm aware that what seems to happen is that the big multinational will get 10 of those portions and then the smaller supplier will only get 2. And it's almost like there's an inequity in apportionment of the jobs. And how does this policy support ever contract construction, pardon my word, but contract or tendering arrangements or proposals so that we can build the capacity, the capability of those smaller suppliers so that eventually they can come up and be big and we can get a real competitive environment and get a better value for our ratepayer dollar.
The local contractors, because you must remember, councillor, that the contracts that you see are typically the large ones. So there's a lot of engagement with local suppliers that it doesn't come to this table because it's, it's under the delegations. So I know in my department, for example, we extensively engage local contractors. And so I'm not sure that we've actually done any measurement on it, but my sense is that over the last few years, the amount of work that's going to local versus the larger organisations has increased. And secondly, you talk about asked the question around constructing of the procurement is that obviously, one way if you wanted to have more is to break up contracts into much more pieces, but that's not necessarily the most efficient. Going to achieve the best outcome in terms of rate, end up with whole lot of administration and paying higher rates because you've got smaller jobs being tendered. So in all procurement, it's about finding the most efficient scale to put out to the market that aligns with your objectives, both from your strategy and policy. Because for us, one of those objectives is to increase the local contribution as well. So that has to be weighed up in the design.
So can you explain how a Section 17A review relates to the procurement process?
It doesn't, it sits outside of it. So Section 17A is the Local Government Act is about council reviewing the way it delivers services. So there's obviously a range of ways it can do it. It can outsource, have it in-house, can combine with other councils. So all large contracts or large services, council periodically, I think it's every 5 years, has to review that. Consider all of the alternatives before deciding which model service delivery it's going to choose.
Right. And
Right, thank you.
last question, Mr.
Sorry, Councillor Deliberations Woodcock, we're going to share this around as part of democracy. Councillor Curnow.
I'm just wondering with the local share question, is there the opportunity to include some sort of requirement to report on this? Because this is a perennial question that comes up, and maybe addressing it by actually having some kind of measurement and reporting the local share.
That could be.
That it's difficult to identify in some cases.
It is, that's right. But yes, there could be a requirement to report that, say annually.
I think.
So council could its objectives.
Yeah, I think that might be helpful if there could be something about.
It might be interesting. Thank you, Councillor Withy. Sorry, Councillor Deliberations, we will return to you, but we just need to hear other voices here today. Councillor Withy.
Thank you. Yes, look, I tend to support the direction of splitting the operational management policy. I think that's a good move. I think the question of local companies being involved in our contracts that we get through this procurement policy, we are doing as best we can. Remember that we've got a duty to our ratepayers for prudent financial management, which means that I believe the policy should clearly state that where quality and cost are equal, then the local person ought to get the job. But we can't subsidise local contractors if they can't meet the efficiencies and quality standards that we require. Now, we've had a case in point here with United Civil, which we hadn't used before. This is a contractor, local Northland contractor, and they've been trialled out here and they've performed extraordinarily well with our roundabouts and shared pathways. So I think we are seeing within the policy a move towards building up the relationships with those local contractors. One area that I think the Deputy Mayor's already touched on that I'd like to see included is that some reference in the policy to the authorised delegations, etc., to make sure that we are not letting any little gap be in there that someone could fill. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Deliberations, final question here. Oh, Councillor Wills, sorry, wake up. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, my question is the responsibility for record keeping. In terms of records that are public excluded, how is there transparency? How do you get to see those?
Well, normally when council considers something in public excluded, there is a restatement clause at the end of that to say when it can be released. The responsibility for record keeping is really about council keeping records. So it could be that, for example, inquire about something and make an inquiry through the ombudsman, and those records probably would be released to the ombudsman, for example, if they were deemed needed necessary to be still kept public excluded.
But so I guess my question is.
Second question.
Yeah, just better question is when the procurement process decides to follow a closed tender approach, there should be a rationale, a written record of the rationale for that. Am I correct?
Well, exactly. There needs to be a procurement plan prepared as per our current manual. And the new policy, there'll be a procurement plan, and then subject to the delegations, it will be approved. So it's below the limit of officers in the executive, for example. It could be done by above a certain amount, $1 million on major capital projects, for example, comes to council, the procurement plan, before we start the procurement. So that approach is not changing currently in the process.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Councillor Wills. And then will there be any further questions? No, right, Councillor Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions, and one is one I can't find, but I'm sure it's in there, which is conflicts of interest, and that was in the previous policy. That was a question, but the conflicts of interest, I can't find it, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere.
I think it's referenced in the policies. And certainly it's incorporated in the draft manual that we're developing for managing conflicts of interest. Whether they be obviously elected members, there's a process for that.
Yeah, but that's mentioned specifically as to our declarations required by elected members.
Yeah.
And for the other question I got, which is feedback I've had from other local contractors when they've tendered for jobs, is that some of the documentation they've had to complete, they haven't had the skill set to do it successfully, and their tenders for work have been rejected on that basis that they didn't complete that application work successfully. And I know it's operational, but is there a way, it's not in here, but is there a way to, or should be in here, is there a way to ensure that those approached to participate are given the opportunity to develop the skill, or that the opportunity for the paperwork to them is at a level that they can complete successfully? And I ask that because I have come back to management before and asked the question, and the answer was, well, if they're not smart enough to fill it in successfully, they shouldn't get the job. But that's not quite, when we're giving a roading job out, we're not asking them to be an academic, we're asking them to be a skilled truck driver.
Look, I think there is a way. I mean, Cuban, for example, I can remember, this is going back some time ago, when they first started engaging in doing council works. And I think they were unsuccessful in the tender. And I actually got I was looking at the infrastructure area of the council at this point. And I got some of the engineers to go along and work with them on explaining why their bid hadn't met the criteria and giving them feedback to help them get to that next level. So it's obviously successful because they've now since come on and become quite a regular operator for council. So that's an approach that officers can use where we've got a direction in the policy for council and strategy to encourage local participation and build capability. And it's about taking that next step and working with some of the contractors to get them to that stage. The health and safety is a difficult one. You need people to be able to be at the right level and have the right competencies. But it's that you can't help them get there or give them direction about how they can.
It's not identified, it's not mentioned in there, and that's why I'm bringing it up. Is that in the policy, it's all very well to say that we want to encourage local activity, but should be an acknowledgement that they're not necessarily all up to that stage when they first start out. So how can we as a council encourage that, either through the application process or through guidance in that regard?
Well, I think that this also references the procurement strategy that council adopted in 2019, which does give us some clear objectives around how we're going to work with contractors.
Yeah.
So the idea is not to have every single.
No, it's gone from 50 pages down to 20, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we're trying to keep it as simple with that, well, being comprehensive enough as an approach. And then by incorporating other things by reference. So you mentioned the conflict of interest. It does mention the local members.
It mentions us, but it doesn't mention staff, I don't think.
Yeah, it will because of council's code of conduct and so forth. So again, so it mentions the Kaipara District Council employee code of conduct.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's a reference that you've simplified it by making it more referencing other documents to make this a simple document.
That's right.
They've cut it down to 40% of what it used to be, words wise.
That's exactly, that's right.
That was only my only concern, is that
Okay, thank you.
we can say words to that local participation, but we also can help them become participants.
Thank you, Councillor Curnow.
And just building on Councillor Wills's comment, there in some councils, and I'm not sure whether this is a New Zealand thing or whether I got it from overseas, but there's an active program of building capability, so like a deliberate program rather than a reactive, oh, they didn't get it right, let's maybe help them a bit. Is there the room for us to consider such a thing, or because obviously there'd be budget needed to do such a thing, but what are your thoughts on a sort of deliberate ongoing education and sort of community building around those local contractors to help them upskill?
Yeah, I mean, if it's something that council wants, it could obviously be developed. But again, as you say, it's going to require resourcing and funding. And that's always a challenge in space. People, particularly at the moment, I know our delivery teams really focus on getting things delivered. Probably have got a lot of capability to contract as much as they possibly could. But
is that maybe something for the next LTP, is actually to look at?
Yeah, or maybe not the setting plan.
Do something deliberate, actually allocate some funding to.
All right, thank you. Councillor Deliberations, you've got more.
Just a point that at the last Northland Forward Together hui, your point, Councillor Wills, was picked up by Councillor Kelly Stratford. She pointed out that Far North actually has an active team that works with suppliers, helping them with compliance and upskilling them so that they can become, regular and reliable suppliers for the district.
Thank you. John, is that sufficient direction?
Yes, that's very helpful.
Thank you very much. So, thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next item, which is Maori freehold land rates, postponement and remission policy. And We have Shireen Mundy joining us. Sorry, and Christine Toms. Sorry, together.
Yes.
Yes. Christine, kia ora.
Kia ora, Shireen's going to start us off.
Kia ora. Kia ora. There is a presentation and Gavin and I have just agreed that he would present it on my behalf so I can just talk rather than trying to drive technology. So I'm assuming that's coming up any second now. The purpose of this presentation, or this item and the presentation, is to present thank you, Gavin, an amended policy to meet new legislative requirements. So I'm going to talk to the process, and Christine, then I'm going to hand over to Christine or the whys and the wheres. Then I'm going to hand over to Christine to talk you through about the actual practical implications of the proposed policy, and then we'll circle back to me for next steps and the where to from here. So slides, if we can skip through to slide 3, please, Gavin. So the key points is that this review is as a result of the amendments to the Local Government Rating of Whenua Māori Amendment Act in 2021 that had implications for both the rating legislation that governs local government rating matters as well as the LGA. Council is required to undertake a review of this policy prior to 1st of July 2022. And is also required, and that links then back to the requirements when such a policy is amended, that consultation must be undertaken prior to finalising such a policy. Due to a range of matters, including capacity issues, this review has not proceeded until this point in time. And that has got some implications that we'll talk through a little bit further. So in the sense that the idea is that this review is the first step in a wider review process that is proposed, in the sense that this review process is just about meeting the statutory requirements in terms of giving effect to the preamble of the Te Ture Whenua Māori Act 1993, but with an acknowledgement that due to time constraints, appropriate consultation and working with mana whenua partners in particular is not possible to meet the 1st July deadline, and therefore it is also proposed to undertake a more fully fleshed out review that will review the matters provided in Schedule 11 of the LGA, and a wider consolidation of how this policy and its approach can fit within the wider suite of financial policies of Council. So that's an overview of why we're here and where we're going and what is proposed. And then as a result of the review, the policy itself is proposing to be changed because some elements of the policy are now duplicated in new legislation, and some consideration needed to be given to what kind of policy approach would actually give effect to the new requirements. So I will hand over to Christine to talk you through those technical matters, and if we can have the next slide, please, Gavin.
Cool, thanks. So under the legislation, a piece of Maori freehold land, a whole rating unit of Maori freehold land is non-rateable. That doesn't provide for a situation where you might have a big piece of Maori land and someone's living on just a part of it. They might have an occupation order, or for some reason they're using a small part of it. If we don't have a remission policy in place, the law doesn't allow us to provide remission or to not charge rates on the unused part. And that is inequitable when you consider the broader aspect of, if it was solely unused, it would be non-rateable under the Act. And so that's just one of the examples that I've put together to show the requirements for us to have that policy in place. I think I've pretty much covered my slide there, actually. I think the next one might be the next steps. Back to Shireen.
Shireen. Have we lost Shireen?
Yeah.
Ramai. The next steps are that council approves a consultation document, including the proposed amendments to the policy at the April council meeting. So that's only a few weeks away. And that we undertake a consultation that meets the requirements of Section 82 of the Local Government Act, noting that the Section 82 requirements are not the requirements of Section 83, which is where a statement of proposal is required for a month's consultation. Section 82 has somewhat more challenging requirements in one way, but is more flexible in terms of how the consultation is actually undertaken, delivered on the ground. A deliberations meeting is scheduled at this stage for the 1st of June, with then the final amended policy to be presented to the 29th of June council meeting. So with 1 day's grace prior to the requirements coming in. Just to note here, I see Councillor Vincent has got his hand up. Just to conclude this matter is that in the recommendations, not in the recommendations, but in the text of the report, it also mentions generally when we do a bylaw policy process, as council is aware, a panel is chosen to hear submitters and deliberate on the matters before presenting a report to council. Due to the time constraints, we're also asking whether council wants to deliberate as a whole on any submissions received on the proposal. The deliberations meeting is scheduled at the end of a briefing day, so all councillors will be present on that day anyway. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shireen. Questions for clarification, Councillor Dilivaris Woodcock.
Thank you, Shireen. Could you just take me through this in baby steps, because I'm going to ask the questions because I actually have found it quite hard to get my head around this. So is this proposed draft policy to enable partial residential occupation or use of a Maori freehold title, which ordinarily would trigger a burden of rates because it's gone from unoccupied to partially occupied or used for storage or pasture? And so is this to enable land that can still be used and like habitation facilitated, but then the remainder of the title or a portion of the title is given a rates remission because it's inappropriate to then put a rating burden on the whole title for what is only a portion of use or occupation?
Yes, got it. That's right.
Wow.
So the unused portion would be not rated, would be rated, sorry, it has to be rated. So the law tells us we have to rate it. Policy can be introduced, which would allow us to not set rates on that unused part for Māori land, yes.
Ah, thank you, I'm on fire.
Good.
Thank you. Councillor Larson, question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks for that. Christine, what's the cost estimated to council to be in loss of rates revenue from those properties?
Okay, so we haven't done the detail around that. What we're seeing is we're not changing anything at the moment because we're not changing anything from what it currently is. At the moment, if there's unused Māori land, we have a remission policy. People can apply for that land to be given rates remission. Any of the full pieces of land that we had as remission through the process of the legislation coming in, we made those non-rateable. So the law told us we had to do that. It's still no impact. The impact is negative because we were rating them but then giving them a remission. But now we don't rate those parts. And any existing remissions that are in place, because people have applied under our existing policy for unused pieces of land to be given a remission, they continue to do so. So really, and because we don't have the resource at this point in time, we haven't done the background, which is another reason why we would like to do a further review of all of this next year when we have got the resource and ability to look further into what other impacts there might be.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got Councillor Vincent and then Councillor Wills. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is probably best answered by Christine, I think. With this apportionment of the rating question, how does that affect the uniform annual charge? I should preface my comments by saying I must apologise for the fact I haven't prepared for this meeting in the way that I normally would, so the answer might well be contained in the document that I haven't noticed.
I don't think it is, because that's quite detailed, quite in depth. So the law allows us to make separate rating areas. So the example I'm using, one large piece of unused land with one house on it, we can separate that out into two pieces. So we would rate one and not rate the other. The UAGC would be effectively cut in half. So half of it would not be received because it's not rated or it's given a remission, and the other half is charged to the property. So if there were if we created three separate rating areas, say there were two different occupiers on the land and the big piece of unused, we would see that UAGC split a third to each piece. 1/3 would be getting rates remission.
Regardless of the value of for UAGC, it wouldn't be affected by the land value,
correct,
but by the fact of the occupation. So it's just the number of interests that are there is the bit that divides the portion of the UAGC. Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vincent. Councillor Wills.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Practical questions, if you like, for the implementation of the policy. Who are we going to rate? I mean, if it's freehold Maori land and it's got, say, a house on it somewhere in a corner, who are we going to rate, and do we have the legal capacity to rate that person? If they, how do we, you know, it's all very well to have a policy, but how will we actually process it?
So in under Maori land, the occupier of the land is responsible for the rates. So the legislation backs that up. So it is a case of us finding out who that person is, resources on the ground or whatever's required.
So there's potentially, I mean, I understand that in the legislation, purely by having a house on it, we have the right to rate the whole property, and this is actually a remission of that right, or a reduction. But in practical terms, and I'm thinking some of the further out, more isolated areas like Pairo and Kaihu, there'll be residences on there that may not even comply with our residency rules, for example, but they're occupied. So there's a couple of questions here. Are they still defined as a residence for rating purposes, even though they don't comply with our building code? And also, the actual, from a practical perspective, the ability, you said on the ground, that requires staff. So there's going to be a cost in managing. I agree, I support the philosophy of what you're trying to achieve, because it's more fair than what's currently legislated. But how are we going to put that in place without actually going negative on the cost versus the potential revenue?
Well, that is a good question. We have got the council have approved position of a Māori whenua officer who is predominantly going to be looking after whenua Māori. So they will be, we've already kind of addressed the resourcing situation to a point. I think it would still come down to just, we may not be able to capture everything. If people are living on the land and we're not aware of it, then there's every chance that that piece of land will be totally, maybe totally unused. So it may be getting non-rateable. If we don't know about it, we can't act on it.
And sorry, the other part of my question was, if it's a non-building code compliant property, if we choose to rate it, does that not indicate a compliance by the council?
I don't believe so, no. Someone can be living, they could have an you could have an occupation order to live on a piece of the land. You can put a caravan on there. That doesn't need to be complied with. I don't believe that from rates, it's giving any signals that your dwelling is up to code. I'm aware of it. Previous experience where we used to rate on separately used parts of a property. People may not have resource consent for what they've done to the property, but rates would still apply. So rates and compliance are separate issues.
Thank you. Councillor Tillerson.
Yes, thank you. I just would like to thank Councillor Wills because his line of questioning is really good because it's helped to explore all the unknowns of this. And my next question is, Christine, thank you. Could we forecast potentially that because of this new policy, we may be able to see a positive net benefit in rates income for our district?
Sorry, I'm just thinking that through. I guess I think your question is if we're identifying land that isn't being used, we're not rating it, or we're giving it a remission, therefore we're not expecting the income. So we would not have it as a debt. Is that the line that you're coming from?
No, more I was thinking that because of the ability to separate out and apportion a rates burden to a portion whilst leaving the broad remainder of unoccupied, inaccessible land, for example, that this is a positive step because it identifies and brings into our rating pool formerly unrateable properties.
Yeah, I think we've probably been rating them all along. We haven't been able to reduce the burden on one particular part potentially. So yeah, I can't, I'm not sure that I can answer your question.
But we've been giving remissions, we've been rating them and then remitting them, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But in this regard, we will be, with the identification of some occupied parts, there's no longer going to be a remission for that occupied part.
Right, so that's right, we'd be rating that part and requiring payment, yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to come in exactly on that point. I think it's absolutely fascinating. So what we have right now is, and I'm going to pull up the wonderful example of the whenua Maori that's a tino pai, where I'm going to say there are 20 dwellings on one title, right? Large amounts of unused land, okay, but of course there's great taonga to the Te Uriaho people. But 20 dwellings there. So where we get to right now is none of those people currently are paying rates. Yeah. So what is proposed here after this is that each one of those dwellings will actually have to be surveyed and identified as a rateable property within the whenua Māori title in general. And then each of those will then get a number put on it, yeah, and become a rateable property, if you like, in that sense. I'm just working through the process here. And those people who have never been required to pay rates will suddenly be receiving a rates notice for their property, for their house.
So I'm not.
Yeah, but not for the 500 acres of the title that it is, yeah, which is remitted, but where the footprints of the houses are, that will be so, yes?
Yes, and I'm not sure of the specific example that you're speaking, but I do believe that we have that situation already happening because the previous law is, we've been able to do this anyway. So I think that potentially there are a number of big pieces of land out there that are already treated in this manner. Each individual is being rated. So it's under our existing policy, really. We're rating these individual properties and the big piece of land that's not being used is not rated. So it's potentially already in place. So we're not changing anything, but we're just making it clearer in the policy.
Okay, so we're not changing anything, but we're making it clearer. So my next question is, if that law changed, and so this is a question for Shireen, if the law changed and we're required to respond in line with the law, how are our neighbour councils, specifically Far North District Council, working with this same law change? Are we in step with them, or are we in a different place?
Well, I would say we're ahead of them, Your Worship. I've just this morning had a conversation with a colleague in Whangarei District Council on this very matter. And in obtaining legal advice throughout this process, the legal advice, said that as well, that we are experiencing the same conundrum as every single other local authority in New Zealand on this matter. So in summary, Whangarei District Council has not resolved how they're going to resolve this, which is concerning from a timeframe perspective. Far North District Council, I understand, has also not addressed this. I haven't had contact with Far North District Council, but equally, the preamble, having to give effect to a preamble is incredibly technically difficult to unpack. It's unfortunate, while people may well agree with the approach of the legislation change and what it was intended to achieve, as I do frequently say to elected members, trying to untangle that and how to have that happen on the ground in a straightforward way that makes sense and meaning for the communities affected by the policy is a much bigger challenge. So I would say we are slightly ahead of the curve in Northland, from what I can tell. At this point in time, Northland Regional Council won't have a policy in this. Oh, yes, it will. Sorry, apologies. It should do. Maybe, I don't know. Actually, Christine might be able to talk to that. But yes, definitely ahead of Whangarei District Council, Far North District Council. We can do some research on this, but this is also why we're proposing this two-step approach. Let's give effect to the legislation and then move on. And as Christine has indicated, your staff are keen to actually really do a really thorough unpacking and a review of this to make sure it's genuinely meaningful in terms of what the legislation change intended.
Thank you. I would want it to be the lowest political risk for Kaipara District Council that it could possibly be if we're blazing a trail here. That's all I would say. What we don't want is the SNA type of protests, which beset Far North District Council, to emerge here simply because we're the first mover.
Appreciate the concern, and that is again the reason for the two-step approach.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Councillor Wills.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Shireen. Help me stay with you. Help me understand this. Everybody else seems to be facing it from a different direction than I am. My understanding from a theoretical perspective was that the current law is that we have the right to rate a property if it's partially used either for animals or farming or storage or a house or residence. Is that correct?
I'm going to have to let Christine talk to that one, Councillor.
All land is rateable unless it's covered in the legislation saying it's not.
So from a theoretical, at the moment, we have the right to rate that Mary Land.
We do.
Land, yes, if it's used in some form or another.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually, we're coming at it from a different direction where in fact we're choosing to not rate all of that unused. I'm looking for the spin on this because that's the theoretical position at the moment from us as a council. So looking to only rate the section around a house, for example, on a largely unused block is in fact a favour, in theory, compared to our current legislation or policy, correct?
So our current policy does allow it. So our current policy provides for that. What we need to do before the before the 1st of July is to have reviewed the policy and to have considered the impacts of the legislation. And our current policy is duplicating what legislation now says. So we need to remove what our current policy says because it's covered in legislation. So our policy is a nonsense if we leave it as it is. We are suggesting that we put forward the ability for people to apply for rates remission in situations where part of the land is used and part is not. And that's existing, but we're just making sure that we've reviewed it within the timeframes and that we're able to provide at least what we're giving now. And next year, when we review it, we might look at further remissions and other scenarios. But for the timeframe that we have, we need to work to what we've got now.
But that was, sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but the legislation caused us to choose to write off a lot of money off our rates this last financial year because those properties were unoccupied. But that was applied en masse across the land that probably did have use of parts of it. Is that correct?
No.
Was there an analysis done of what we wrote off, whether it was completely unused or that there was portions that were used?
Yes, there was, and it was discussed through the Audit and Risk Committee, I believe, and it's been discussed at times. I think there were 13 in total. Sorry, don't quote me on that number, but it's around that quantity, and it was a desktop exercise predominantly, and local knowledge, and also the use of our district valuation role, which indicated that there were no improvements on the land, no fencing, no, yeah, it was only 100% of the unused land that was being provided that write-off and made non-rateable.
So am I allowed not to ask the question now and make a comment? This is a comment rather than a question. I support the philosophy, it seems fair, to not fully rate properties of these particular ones that are multi-owned and not utilised. But I would still appreciate an indication of the financial cost to the council of doing so. That would be in our final discussion for me, is to have an indication of how much rates remission we're going to likely come up with as a result of this policy.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not sure that we have the resource to do that within this timeframe. Are you looking at wanting that before June, or are you looking at it as broader?
It would be difficult as a council to make a policy decision when I don't have an idea of what it's going to cost the council.
Fair enough.
Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Wells' question associated with the potential foregoing of rates by application of this policy. What I'm hearing is, from an operational point of view, there's going to be quite a lot of resource required to actually put this into place or within the rating resources of the council. Have we got those resources? We're always stretched for resources, and I'm just worried that we're putting in place here or potentially a policy like some of our other policies where they've got monitoring requirements. We haven't got anyone to monitor, so to some extent it's a bit of a moot point putting the monitoring in there. So if we're putting this in there, have we got the resources to actually work all this out?
It comes down to the ratepayers approaching us for remission and an ongoing review of that here. So yeah, other councils do cope with this with 1 or 2 rating officers dedicated to it. So I can't answer for sure whether we've got it right. But
the word you used there, Christine, that interests me is those other councils with a couple of staff dedicated to it, suggesting it's the main focus.
I'm meaning excuse me. A dedicated, like we will have a whenua Maori officer, which has been approved by council to be onboarded in July.
All right, okay.
Thank you, Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks, Christine. Just heading, as we head forward, do you know how many properties there are? I may have missed that. how many properties could the occupiers apply for remission on under this practice?
Yeah, we haven't done that. We haven't done that analysis. As I say, we've got the existing policy now. We've got very few properties, and I haven't said that actually, but we've got very few properties that currently get remission in this way. So we haven't been able to go any further than where we are now.
Okay, yes. So going forward, we'll see some figures on this and how much there are, how much expected to cost the ratepayer and what sort of stuff.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's, I think that's sufficient direction for this item at this point, knowing that it's going to be coming to the April council meeting for a decision regarding the process ahead. And
what about the potential? They asked Mr. Mayor whether or not we have a panel that takes comment from people who are submitting to it.
So that's part of the next steps that is locked into the process here. So that'll be
happy for that to go ahead.
That is be our decision. Sorry, that will be in the decision paper, Mr. Maris, that actually comes, which will be there'll be a panel to engage with the chat with the councillor, and that will be these people, and this will be the process here regarding the deliberations on that. So that will all be clarified with that paper. Shireen, are you waving at us?
I can't find the question button, Your Worship, sorry. The hand raising button. What we're seeking direction from is whether we're suggesting that for ease of the process that there wouldn't be a panel established, but that the deliberations on any submissions would be held by the entire council. So it'll be council as a whole would deliberate on any submissions raised to then follow through to the decision meeting of council. That's due to the fact that the deliberations are scheduled on a council briefing day already anyway, and that due to the time constraints, it streamlines things somewhat in terms of timeframes. But we're also suggesting that the council would nominate maybe 2 members to have the speak to a councillor sessions as we've held for the previous bylaw processes. So we're seeking direction on that in terms of what recommendations to put in the report for the decision making process through to council meeting.
Okay, thank you. So I'm comfortable with the direction that you're proposing there, specifically regarding the deliberations being on a council other briefing day, and that all the council is present, so that all of the councillors are involved in the journey as much as possible. I think that would be good in this important work.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not getting any other comments. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shireen. Thank you, Christine. We'll see you at the April council meeting in due course on this item. Thank you. Final item for today is the elected member protocols 2022 local government elections. We have our governance officer, Gavin Dawson, to present this item. So, Gavin.
Hi, everyone. I'm just quickly take you through this process. So it's common at the beginning of every at the end of every triennium before an election that council officers bring forward a number of protocols and guidelines for existing elected members that also become part of the protocols for candidates. And there it's quite detailed, and that's provided in the attachment to this report. These criteria and guides, that's part of a regional response that we've developed as part of a regional response to election planning for this year, or for this election. So the criteria, I guess it's all about protecting you as current elected members, because there's a perception that you do have access to materials. But it's also about protecting staff so that that staff are aiding in an independent election and they're not being seen to be assisting other candidates, whether they're sitting or. So it's quite clear. I'm happy to take questions for that.
Thank you. Councillor Deliberations Woodcock.
So in terms of there being behaviour prior to the date of 8th of July, members are allowed to just do business as usual and be out and about in the community as usual. And this is only referring to activity from the 8th of July.
That's correct.
And so, for example, our councillor social media page, we can still, from the 8th of July, make posts. We cannot use councillor logo or we cannot use the logo or anything like that. We can start.
That's good. I guess the guide for that is if you have a social media post on any of your socials, the test will be, does it look like that is a council sponsored or supported post?
Right.
So that's where in the pre-election period you need to be really careful around what you support, what you're tagging in, because if what we will be doing if there is a tag from any candidate where it could be perceived as council, the entity, showing any form of support for one or the other, we do police that as well.
So, for example, if you post a link to the July council meeting and it comes up with Kaipara District Council logo, which it does, that's not allowed.
That would be allowed, would be the context around it, because the logo comes up with what we produce automatically.
Okay.
Yes. So if I could add, one of the things that everyone would not be happy about is if you were to have access or a candidate were to have access to a document that any other candidate who's not around this council table does not have access to. So if you were to put out a document, say, well, here's this thing that's not on, has never been on the agenda, but is a council document from deep in the archives that I was able to get, that no one else from the public was able to get, if you like, that a candidate who's a councillor, if you like, has a perceived privilege above any other candidate who's not a councillor, that's very much frowned upon. Yeah, regarding those social media posts. So that's part of why the issues about where are logos or what is a council thing, and this person, wow, they're already a councillor, that made it easy for them to have access to all that information that the other candidates can't fairly have access to, if you like, because it tilts the playing field. That's part of what this is talking to, is trying to make it the same for an internal candidate as for someone who's nothing to do with the council today.
And through you, Worship, in addition to that, what we will be doing is if candidates do request information, all of that information that is requested is given to all of the other candidates. So it's level, and as you say, it deals with that perception of privilege and hopefully a kind campaign season.
Through the chair. When are incumbent councillors able to announce publicly that they intend to run? Is there any time frame on that?
No, you could announce at this meeting if you wanted to.
So then, okay.
But there is within that, once you start campaigning, then that's when you need to start applying all of your authorisation statements, and the electoral standards start coming in. So, yeah.
So again, no one would be able to stand up at this meeting and announce their candidacy, because in theory, they'd be using the camera and the computers of the council and the broadcast function to get it out to the world. Yeah, so that's an unfair
Advantage.
So it's a privilege, if you like, that the rules kind of work not to
But
allow those.
the mayoralty's already started because Wayne Brown's on TV already.
Sorry, and he's allowed to do that. Yeah.
Who was that?
But he's not using the council's.
Not incumbent.
He's not using the council's cameras and governance officers who set up the link on the Facebook for the YouTube. He's not. He's not.
It's
Oh.
for you, Worship,
Yeah.
to also add to that, they've had, at our electoral officer, briefings, that we've had a couple of months ago, there is a lot more clarity around what, the mayors and deputy mayors can and can't do around that pre-election period. So, it's around what's key. And I guess for any of you as elected members, the key here is, are you promoting yourself and using KDC to do it, or are you promoting KDC work? And that's the test that time. So it's about perception, but it's about being disciplined around it, and also being cognizant of the fact that all candidates are adults, and the expectation from staff.
That's a big assumption.
Is that we want a fair election, and we want an election that will engage people and bring confidence.
The National Party.
If I can sort of just jump in with an example, with my announcement that I'm standing in this ward, and the Magnify focus.
You're on camera, okay.
Sorry, it's already in the papers. It's already in the newspaper. And what I'm doing is giving
Promoting it further on the camera. That's right, that's right.
Okay, just wanted to talk about the photo, but that's all right.
No. Best left it right out of the room. But lessons learned. Right, lessons learned. Okay, thank you, Gavin, for this item. And July will come around soon enough. I've got a question for you. Does this work that you've got here align with the other councils across Northland? I'm aware that the governance teams, your governance, wonderful people, advisors, are working closely together to create a coherent set of approaches. Is what's here kind of being replicated in the other councils?
That's correct. We started, we formed the elections working group in July last year. And we have been working through to make sure that there's a consistent approach, because we also have NRC candidates as well. So yes, that's we've all got the pre-election time starting from the same time.
Yeah.
And all the planning, the general awareness campaigns are done at the regional level as well. So you'll see a lot of, as you go through the region, you'll see a lot of similarity, but we also have our own. But that's another matter I won't get into now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Tilivaris Woodcock.
Is there any risk that the government may postpone local government elections? Have they?
Through the chair, there is an ability for our electoral officer, Dale Opsowski, to extend the voting period by 2 weeks at a time if it's warranted. So COVID Omni Delta tipped up, and for instance, that would impede the progress in the making delay. But also, if there's a national, and that's at a regional, local level. If there's a national response, then through the Executive Council, with the ministers and Governor General, they can extend at 6 weeks to 6 weeks. But the criteria for that is very, very high, and feedback from the electoral reference group, that's the National Reference Group, and and DIA, is that that's very unlikely at this stage.
Thank you, Gavin. It's clear. Okay, all clear. Thank you. At this point, we've come to the end of our morning session for today. So this is also the end of the public component of today's Kaipara District Council briefing. I'd like to acknowledge the members of the public who've patiently contributed to and enjoyed watching today's briefing and its fascinating content. So I wish the members of the public a good day from this point. The Kaipara District Council will be continuing on with a public excluded workshop after this briefing. So I wish you all a very good day. Kia pai tō rā.
Good.